Absolute Emperor by Boyd Bruce, part of Osprey Wargames Blue Book series. We've done the Battle of Mincio River. And let me start off by congratulating any of you guys that sat through all 90 minutes of that slog. Man, that game bogged down towards the end there, didn't it? We probably should have just called it quits about halfway through. Once the French had taken that northern town, it was pretty much all over. I think at the end of the day, it probably wound up more of a draw than anything else. Part of that is because we're still learning the process and playing the rules, and let's be honest, we bit off a little bit more than we could chew with that one. We had some really complicated terrain on the board, and then we added the complications of the nation-specific and year-specific rules, which, before we go any further, be aware of those things, man. Be aware of how they affect your point battles. Now, of course, I was doing a historical scenario where I largely used the forces that were given to me. However, with that said, there's also the issue that you got to kind of step back and say, what's going to make this an interesting game? If you're using these nationality special rules, take a look at them before you start playing, because some of these things are wildly unbalancing. Boyd gives you a nice, easy point buy system here on page 43, but he gives you 1 point for the French. Hey, you know what? Minor German states use French until 1813, then Prussian. But really, the big thing here is that if you're using the French list, the French in 1802 are very different from the French in 1813. In 1814, they are really hamstrung. So you can't assume that any 100-point army that you build with the French is going to be equal to any other 100-point army. In addition to the makeup of the army having a difference based upon the scenario that you're playing, you also have these. Got to pay more attention to these in the future. You may want to give yourself a 10% bump or a 10% deficit to one of the forces to help accommodate the fact that our Austrians, they were using mass column tactics. They've got this benefit. They automatically form square against cavalry. Our French, the cavalry, receive no charge bonus. They cannot use line formation. That's huge, man. That means all of your infantry divisions are only rolling 2d6 at the most whenever they're attacking. So that's big. We got to be aware of that moving forward when we do our scenarios. The other thing is we added in some complicated reinforcements and kind of balanced things out midstream. We let some reinforcements attach to a different commander-in-chief, and it was just kind of a mess. But the big thing I want to talk to you about today actually has to do more with how you move your boys around. And one of the things that I've discovered after sitting down and thinking about it, dreaming, making sure I had some lucid dreams about Absolute Emperor, you gotta embrace the spirit of the rules. It's not enough to merely go by the letter of those rules. You always gotta remember, top down, right? Professionals do strategy, amateurs do tactics. And we got bogged down in tactics in a lot of ways in that last video that we should not have, because we're primarily here in the channel, most of what we do is skirmish gaming. One figure equals one dude. It's usually not a big deal, but you have absolute control over any. There's something under my cloth. There it is. Oh, it's a dead bee. Sorry, bug. That's distracting. Very professional, I know. We have a lot of control over our individual dudes, and then where we want our individual guys to go determines where our generals go. Let's go ahead and break out a couple of divisions here, right? We've got our detachment here with their leader. One of the things to be aware of is that our leader only has a 4-inch command radius, which means if you want to spread out on a line, brother, you get 2 to either side, and that is it, because he's already at the maximum that he can stretch out. Unless you've got, I'll slide them all down over here, unless you've got your army commander-in-chief. And this is one of the big things when you're dealing with a larger battlefield. You got to remember that this guy, so here's our corps commander, and here's our army commander. If a unit is within 4 inches of him, they are also considered in command, even if they're off away from the corps commander. You can send little detachments out, which gives you a little wider area to play. That's important to remember. But the big thing comes in when it's time to do some movement. So we have our general over here. And what happened in the last video is I would say, well, I want these guys to be here, which means I need this guy to be here. And I grab my ruler. Let me go ahead and grab that out here real quick and just kind of show you exactly what was going on and why that was a mistake. It's okay, well, I want this guy to be stretched out 4 inches, so if he's going to be there, then that means I need to measure and make sure that this guy is 4 inches, and then I got to measure across and go, oh no, my army commander's 8 inches away. So, but I need him because there's another guy over there. Okay, fine, so I'm going to pull this guy over here, and then maybe I need to pull these guys. Whoa, hold on now. This is called pixel bitching. These guys don't determine where he goes. Absolute Emperor puts you in the role of Commander-in-Chief. The information and the orders flow from the Commander-in-Chief down to the Corps commanders and then down to the line troops. Not the other way around. And worse is when you get into that iterative process. This should not be iterative. What we're going to do moving forward is we're going to make this guy, we're going to put him in charge, and we're going to honor that. He's going to move to wherever. Now, and remember, he's got a maximum move of 4 inches, so he's going to have to think ahead. Do I want to hang back, or do I want to move up? It doesn't really matter for the most part, because he can't be charged, he can't be shot at. Not a big deal, but if he wants to be way down south, he might have to move up a little bit now. And that might mean dragging this Corps commander up with him before that Corps commander really wants to move. Remember, he's got to stay within 8 inches of the Army commander. So we're going to move the Army commander, then we're going to move the Corps commanders. Again, this is where we're going to try to make sure that we keep him within 8 inches. And if that means that slide just over there we go. So we're going to go, there's 8 inches, so our Corps commander has to be there. And if that means that our infantry unit can't quite get to where they want to be. Oh, I wanted them to be just a little bit further that way. Too bad. I guess on your next turn, you're going to have to move this guy over so that you can move your Corps commander over so that they can move up. It's going to slow the game down in a lot of ways because these guys are going to find themselves caught outside of charge range. Remember, they have a 1-inch zone of control to their front, but they can shoot 2 inches. They can charge 2 inches. And again, that's one of the other things to point out. But if they don't quite make it to where you want them, you don't get to go back and move this guy. He's already done. So this is the way that we're going to keep ourselves honest and force ourselves to think as a general does, not as an NCO. Say hello to my very little friends. This is a division of Russians, and we've got one artillery. We've got our leader over here in the center, and then we'll do a little bit of a rack focus so you can see our horses way off here in the back. They are widely spread out from the looks of things, but they are as spread as they can get. See, here's our 4 inches. Here's our 4 inches. Again, these cavalry back here are 4 inches away. This is as big as you can get and still be within command radius. If I pull back to show you the full 30 by 30 table, well, that's pretty good, except that these guys are not supporting each other in any way, shape, or form. Remember that most of your musket fire is about 2 inches, excuse me. Your cannons have a range of fire of out to 12 inches, so they have a little more room. I show you this to show you what the maximum extent is. Now, in a practical scenario, you don't want this. You want these guys kind of more on top of each other so that they are actually supporting each other. I mean, generally speaking, this is a much more reasonable thing. And we saw this when we fought the Battle of Bumville, both one and the sequel, and of course, completing the trilogy. The phrase knife fight in a phone booth has been used for this rule set fairly often, and that's because it is a very tight game if you are playing a 100-point battle, or just a generic 1 corps at a time. When you start fighting with multiple corps, then something interesting happens. Then you have multiple knife fights in multiple phone booths. If we have another corps, and I'll put that corps commander right over here, the reason that happens is because of the way the orders work in conjunction with this more tactical level game. Remember that all of your guys have one of basically 4 orders. They are either attacking a geographic point, they are defending a geographic point, or they are retreating. I think that's pretty much about it. Oh, or they could be holding, right? Defend and then attack. But that's it. So one of the difficulties with this game is how stingy the game is with elan. Elan is used to keep track of the health of your core. With the loss of a division, there's a good chance that you're going to be losing an elan. Elan are also used to change the orders. Well, why would you spend an elan changing orders when all that's going to do is reduce the amount of time you can spend on the battlefield? Particularly if you're in a situation where your core commander is down to his last elan and he has to choose. Well, if he's down to his last elan, he can't give an order because then he would just immediately start withdrawing. The only order he could give is retreat. So if he's down to 2 elan, he already can't issue any orders. Now that's a problem because most scenarios are going to have multiple checkpoints for you to arrive at, multiple objectives over which you're going to be fighting. You'll have to forgive me if any of this stuff seems really obvious to you guys. Sometimes I need to step through things. I need to walk through things. I can't run the numbers every single time. You know, it's kind of like when you're doing any kind of a risk analysis and you think, well, you know, I'm riding my motorcycle down the highway and there's a light rain. Should I continue to go 60 miles an hour even though the speed limit is 55? Which, you know, it might be appropriate when it's dry, but now it started raining a little bit, and so it's a little more dangerous. And did I remember my helmet or not? You don't go through all the numbers. You just kind of do a little bit of intestinal mathematics to run the risks. You know, for example, if someone said, here, I want to inject you with this serum, and no, I won't tell you what's in it, and also I spent 60 years selling people baby powder that's laced with asbestos. But you know what's in here? Dude, trust me, bro. No, you're not sticking that in me. I don't think so. You know, that kind of thing. So that's what's going on here is I want to show you kind of what's in my headspace. I want to do a 200-point battle of Prussians v. Russians. I like stuff that rhymes. We've got a little corner of the battlefield here. We've got our little phone booth with one division that the army commander has been given the order, hey, go seize the wooded hill. There's also the bridge, and there's also the forest over here. All right, so they go over. Corps commander's got what? Maybe a 3. He's a regular Joe. And so he drags his shooty boys over, and he loses 1 unit, but he takes the hill. So remember, he had orders to take that hill, attack the hill. Now that he's attacked the hill, but you know what? Because he lost one of his units, his elan is down to 2. All right, so there's other stuff going on here. Now we have the difficult situation where maybe, he lost these guys too. Now he's down to 1 elan, and he's got units, but all he can do is defend this hill. Whatever happened over here is still going on. You've got resources that you would be able to dump into one of these other 2 objectives, except that the elan rules mean that you can't move. He's down to 1 elan. He can't change their orders from attack the hill, which automatically become defend the hill, to go support the attack on the bridge. If the Prussians are doing the same thing over here, the game can very easily bog down into a stalemate of, well, I mean, I took this, but I lost over here, they retreated, and what do you do? There's no process for this situation within the game itself. I mean, other than, don't lose your horses. Yeah, that's great. The dice have a lot more to say about that than you do. So I'm struggling to figure out whether or not there's a reasonable way to implement some kind of order change process that will allow for that kind of tactical decision to be made. You need meaningful choices in your war games. If you're not playing if you're not having any meaningful choices to make, you're not playing a game. You're just a human computer that's running down a list of checkboxes. You're just following a series of instructions or a program without meaningful decisions. We like games that have lots, and the more meaningful decisions there are, the more we tend to enjoy those games. If I wanted to just follow a list of instructions, I would pick up a good novel and sit on the sofa for 10 minutes, and believe me, the wife would have lots of instructions for me. That's not what I want to do. I want to make meaningful choices. So the question is, when you've got a situation like this, and you've got your knife fight in a phone booth over here, core versus core, and you've got one over here, core versus core, then, I mean, that's another thing we can talk about, is if you don't have any meaningful way to assist this attack over here, what are you even doing? I guess with a situation like this, maybe you pull your core commander as far away from the objective as you can. I mean, one of your guys has to stay. But then you can at least go, all right, we'll task this guy over as kind of a detachment. And then you can get, that 9 inches away to support. I guess that's one way to do it. But otherwise, the other thing to consider here is, if you got core versus core and core versus core with no way to support, you might as well just play this Battle of Bumville 1, and then play Battle of Bumville 2, and then Battle of Bumville 3 is a separate game where you take the survivors of the first 2 battles and attack Bumville one more time. We did something very similar to that when we used 2x2 Napoleonics to refight the Battle of Cholet. We did the Vendée left, the Vendée center, the Vendée right, and then whichever Vendée survived did a final attack on Cholet. And the better they did in each of those 3, the more troops they had for both the Vendéans and the Dirty Filthy Republicans for that final attack or defensive Cholet, respectively. Why wouldn't you just do this here? Well, we'll do this 1 core versus 1 core first, and then we'll do this 1 core versus 1 core first, and put together a mini campaign that way. Well, that's not the point of the game, right? The point of the game is far more strategic, because your dude, your army commander, is having to sacrifice his attention on one side of the battlefield for the other side of the battle. And I guess I just answered the question, didn't I? Is that where the interest comes in? That if this guy is over here on this half of the battlefield, it gives a lot more free reign for this core, whereas these guys, they might be just left out on their own devices, and they're stuck having to attack from a suboptimal direction because their core commander is being pulled off in a direction he doesn't want to go. Maybe this is a much better avenue of attack on this hill, but, I mean, we can't do that because our army commander has decided that we need to be tugged along over here. Maybe that's what it is. I'm not sure, so we're going to take a look at that in the next battle report. The question is, how are we going to do that? Now, I want to do 2-on-2. I think 3x3 is probably a bit too much. The last 2x2 core versus 2 core is about 200 points, but again, it's a historical battle, so we didn't really balance the points as well as we wanted to. I think in this case, what we do, because it's 200 points versus 200 points, we go with a largely symmetric battlefield, and we'll do something like this, where we'll say, look, if the Russians are coming up this way, we'll have an objective in the center, and we'll have an objective nearby and an objective over here, and then husband your resources, right? If we put these things further than 9 inches apart, you're going to have to decide, well, do I want to throw, and the victory condition will be whoever controls 2 out of the 3 at the end of the battlefield. So now you have a situation where you can have some meaningful choices at the start of the game. Maybe you send both of your core against both cores against the center, and then whichever core has enough elan left, you can dispatch off to the other one, to that outside. That may be the way to do that, to do a 200. Now, I do think, none of this is a complaint, by the way. I think this would be a great game for conventions, because you do have, in any given scenario, if you're using 100-point buys, your core commander is absolutely going to have, he's going to be fighting in a little chunk of the battlefield, but that's largely what happens in a lot of these exercises anyway. Some of you old guys, you don't want to be standing and leaning over a table the whole time. Have a seat. This 1 by 12 inches by 12 inches of the battlefield, that's your corner. Go to town, brother. You've got 4 to 6 units that you can kind of maneuver and do what you need to do. Go for it. In a convention setting, a 3x3 is going to be perfect. That's actually a great point. You are going to be somewhat limited based on your army commander, right? Because I keep thinking he's got an 8-inch command radius. He's actually got an 18-inch command radius. And you may need to just make that bigger, because with an 18-inch command radius, he's going to have one guy right under him and two guys off on the wings. Whereas if you're doing, at least with a 28 millimeter, again, I'm doing everything half size. My guy only has a 9-inch command radius instead of that. Is that right? 18. Let me grab my notes here. Oh, yeah, never mind all that. I forgot. It's 18 inches at my scale. This guy's got a command radius of 18 inches. If he's sitting in the middle of the battlefield, everybody is in his command radius. Remember, he might not want to do that because he may want to scooch over to bring these guys out as a detachment away from this corps commander's radius of influence. So where are we at? We'll go over it real quick because it got a little rambly there. Move your army commander first, then your corps commander, then bring your troops up to wherever they're going to sit, one at a time. Once you let go and start moving the next group, he's got to sit tight where he is. That's the big one. Number 2, remember the points are not all created equal. Take a look at your period and nation-specific rules to determine whether or not you want to kind of bump somebody up or knock them down a peg to rebalance your forces. And then number 3, just be aware that you got to give some thought to how individual corps are operating. If you've got a complex battle situation where there are multiple objectives, give your corps commanders a couple of extra elan. They're going to need it so that after you capture one objective, you still have the impetus to be able to drive forward and capture additional objectives in the late stages of the game. Thanks for listening to my rant. Thanks for helping me figure this out and walk through it. I think we're going to have a much better time with our next battle, which again will feature our green-suited Russians versus, here, let me pull them out. And I don't know if the Russians and the Prussians fought in the Napoleonic. I don't know. I'm not great at it. You know, one of the reasons I play this game is to force me to learn. Here's some of my Prussian heavy cavalry. We're going to see those guys. I don't know if they fought. If they did, then that's the battle we're doing. It's just kind of a nameless battle. Some point during the Napoleonic, featuring the black-clad Prussians versus our green-jerseyed Ruskies. There you go. And there's the boys in black. So it should be easy to tell who's who. I have black with yellow helmets, so they stand out pretty good. I'm praying for you. Fridays is my rosary for my viewers. Thanks, guys.